You remember Brightburn, right? The film that took everyone by storm for the evil version of Superman like Young Boy? Well, Andy Chen's The Spider is just that, but with a runtime of just over 9 minutes, and instead of Superman, this time we have ourselves the evil and most diabolic version of Spider-Man ever seen in live action. I won't take a lot of time building up a long intro, but let me tell you, this Peter Parker is what you should expect if Spider-Man and the Brundlefly from Cronenberg's classic ever had a love child. So without further ado, let's dive straight into The Spider. This supremely excellent and well-crafted Spider-Man short film is exactly what the description promises. A horror take on Spider-Man, but to be honest, I believe that description is more of an understatement or an oversimplification of what the short film actually is. Comparable to Oats Studios' Shorts by Neil Blomkamp, The Spider begins just as any other Spider-Man origin film, but ends up being what no Spider-Man movie has ever been, and probably never will be. Just take a look at this horrific product of the film. The film essentially begins with Chandler Riggs as Peter getting bitten by what seems like a genetically modified spider. It does not take long for the effects of the venom to do its thing. Peter immediately has a series of hallucinations that are nothing more than stills from a forgotten dream. Very intriguing nonetheless. Nevertheless, the night falls and Peter finds himself struggling with the spider bite on his wrist. Next thing we know, he is getting knocked down by a car. The two men who get out of the car are basically muggers, and one of them wants Peter's wallet, although the other one tries to remind him that it is just a kid. As soon as the former approaches Peter, Peter grabs his hand. In what is the first of many gory scenes, the man's hand gets covered in a gooey web with shades of red. My assumption is that the enzymes from Peter's bite caused the man's hand to melt, and of course the blood got mixed with Peter's web. Peter returns home, horrified, hands covered in blood, which he desperately tries to wash off. However, the bite wound was getting worse by the minute. He grabs a hand towel to wipe the water off, but it gets stuck on his palm. Needless to say, the other abilities of Spider-Man were just getting unlocked. After much effort, he is able to get rid of the towel, but manages to get his hands stuck on the wall. When he tries to get some leverage from his feet to break free, he discovers that he can actually crawl on the wall. Now, I gotta mention something here. So, although the music was given by Alexander Taylor, the background music in this whole scene, at about 3 minutes and 18 seconds, sounds a lot like the intense music from Stranger Things. Moving on, Peter goes out of his window, crawling the wall to reach the terrace, from where he jumps from one building to another. He is ecstatic because of his new abilities, and all of this is pretty much a nod to most of the origin movies of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. This one was gonna be different. You'll see how in just a bit. So Peter returns to his room and throws up, only to realize that a tooth has fallen off. He inspects and finds out that all his teeth are falling. He gets knocked out, only to find himself at his class the following day. When his friend, presumably MJ, wakes him up, the class was shocked to see Peter's pale face, as if all his blood had been drawn out. Furthermore, you could see that his face is filled with the same gooey stuff from earlier, only this time, there's no blood. They immediately call for an ambulance and Peter is taken away. The paramedics are horrified at what they're seeing, having not seen anything like this earlier. Peter grows a spike from his belly and the screen goes dark just before showing a splash of blood. When we return, we find ourselves at Uncle Ben and Aunt May's, basically Peter's home. Ben hears something and calls for Peter, but hears nothing in response. So he climbs up to Peter's room and asks if he can come in. However, Peter refuses in a voice that sounds equal parts monstrous and sick. Uncle Ben tries to remind him of that thing about responsibility. Little does he know that his dear nephew is a lost cause, and if he does not stop intruding his nose into Peter's business, he will be lost soon too. Alas, Uncle Ben had not watched the first part of the short and goes into Peter's room. It's not long before that Aunt May returns home to news about a freak accident of an ambulance covered in spiderweb. Unable to find Peter and Ben, she walks into Peter's room, only to face a fear she could not even have imagined. Peter is feeding off his dead uncle, but Peter looks far from human. The cannibalistic human spider has grown eyes on his skull. There is hardly any skin left on his face, and to add to the horror quotient, Peter has now developed a couple of giant pincers where his teeth once were, and the film ends with a shriek from Aunt May, while Peter just stares at her with a look that could scare the strongest of horror buffs. But that's not it. There's a post-credit scene as well in this 9-minute film. A woman runs in another dark alley, of course. She is running from the evil Spider-Man. The jump scare hits you when Peter appears on screen. By now, he has gone full Brundlefly from David Cronenberg's classic creature feature, The Fly. Absolutely disgusting to look at, but somehow you don't want to take your eyes off the beast. I mean, it would be years before Sony or Marvel did this with a friendly neighborhood superhero. I love what I saw and would love to see more of this stuff. In fact, if you like this one, you could take a look at the horror version of Shrek, also directed by Andy Chen. This guy is an up-and-coming horror director, and it is becoming obvious that he would go places, maybe on the lines of Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who started off with shorts and went on to give some of the wackiest horror films in the industry. In fact, they ended up working on a majority of episodes from the second season of Loki. So, is there something similar on the cards for Andy Chen? Well, only time will tell, but I have my fingers crossed.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.